A film that is 10 years in the making has just dropped. I am talking about The Flash 2023, the movie starring Ezra Miller at least twice. And it is directed by Andy Muschietti, who a couple of guys on this panel are very familiar with. I'm talking about my good friend over there and co-host of the Lastercast, Dr. Zayas God, Danny Torkel. And I'm talking about It Chapter 2 and Chapter 1. And down there below us, Brady Bunch style, is Chris D'Onofrio, founding member of the Lastercast, and Future Boy Chris on YouTube. And then last but not least over here, or I don't know where the fuck I'm pointing. There we go. My good friend Brian and co-host on this channel, Comic Books Transformed, where we talk about comic book adaptations into movies and live streaming shows. Wait, this is live. Okay, I'm fucking all over the place because there's so many people in these boxes in front of me. We're here to talk about the fucking Flash. Some of us liked it, some of us didn't. I want to know first and foremost from you guys, right? Who of you would want this universe to keep going versus the reboot that we're getting from James Gunn? Danny, why don't you start us off?
I don't think I'm the best person to. I mean, I'm not at all. I didn't grow up a DC fan. I was a Marvel fan my whole comic book reading and collecting life. And I'm an MCU guy. I don't like. I love. I was just saying to you guys before we started recording, I've been like down a Batman rabbit hole. I rewatched Batman '89, Batman Returns, and Batman Forever in the last like 2 days. As far as this universe goes, I thought Man of Steel was okay. I thought it was fine. I thought Batman vs. Superman is not as bad as people think it is, but it is deeply, deeply, horrendously flawed.
Okay.
I also didn't see a lot of these movies. I didn't see the Black Adam. I didn't see the second Shazam movie. And I haven't seen either version of the Justice League. Either the Joss Whedon disaster or the Zack Snyder, movie that the stands will throw themselves in front of buses for. So I've not seen either of those movies. So the fact, just a little like heads up to my opinion, the fact that I haven't seen those Justice League films and I really have no cinematic background with Ezra Miller as the Flash. Maybe that's why the lack of expectations I had is why I enjoyed myself so much in the theater last night when I saw it. At least for like parts of it. Like it's a flawed movie, but I would give it probably a 3 out of 4, 8, or maybe a 4, low 4 out of 5. I enjoyed this movie. Do I want to see this universe continue? No, because James Gunn is taking it over. And James Gunn has a pretty flawless track record with anything he touches involving superheroes. So I'm willing to throw out the baby and the bathwater and let James Gunn take it over from here.
Okay. Brian, I'm kind of assuming based on our discussions, you feel a similar way.
I'm going to say it in a lot less words, and no, I do not want this universe to continue. I do think Batman vs. Superman is as bad as people say it is. And although I wasn't, I feel like I'm going to have the lowest opinion of this movie out of this group here. But at the same time, I believe the director is being tapped for the Batman Brave and the Bold movie. I'm still excited for the idea of that. I don't think it was his fault necessarily here, or from my point of view. Yeah. So I'm ready for something new here. I need a fresh start here, and I'm at the point where let's get rid of everything at this point. Complete clean slate. Don't even keep the good stuff. Complete clean slate. And I love it.
Okay. Well, Chris, I caught your like quick review on your YouTube channel, and it sounds like you liked some things about this movie, but you thought there were some flaws too. How do you feel in general? Because I don't think I've talked to you on here that much about just previous DC films so far that have come out like the last decade.
Well, I mean, to answer your question right off the bat, I'm ready for this all to end because it didn't I love Man of Steel, and I'm a lifelong Superman. I mean, I watched George Reeves on Nick at Night when I was a kid. I read the comics, love Christopher Reeve, but I was ready for something new, and that's what Man of Steel was. But I think something I wasn't ready to admit at the time is I loved Man of Steel so much because I thought I knew what was or what was supposed to come immediately after that, and it never came.
Huh.
Man of Steel was supposed to be this is not Superman yet story. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm good with that. Like, this is a great story to tell he's not the Superman And we never got there. It just got darker. So, and it was, and you have to wonder, was it hubris, ego, with DC and Warner Brothers, we can't possibly do the same thing Marvel's doing and lay this out perfectly. No, everything had to get done ass backwards. We're going to jump around here, jump around there. And I feel like while I did enjoy many things about The Flash, I also feel like it was just another example of them jumping around too much. Brian and I spoke about this briefly, but the Flashpoint story is one of the best Flash stories ever. And to really just cherry pick from that for this is so disappointing as a DC fan and a Flash fan. And just when you know what it could have been.
Yeah. Well put. All of your answers are great. I think that a lot of people, and I think Chris, you mentioned this before too in our chat, that a lot of people weren't satisfied with Ezra Miller as Barry Allen, right? Just the way that he performed as Barry Allen in the movies. People just didn't buy into that. And I think that that's probably a major setback for this movie to begin with. I want to hear each of your opinions on this now. Brian, why don't you start us off? Can you tell me, how'd you feel about Ezra Miller in this movie?
Watching this movie made me realize I don't like Ezra Miller. This completely removed from his personal actions outside of the movie. It was just too much. I don't like I understand that the Justice League movie needed some kind of comic relief. And I guess they found Flash for that. Yeah. I don't really like this ADHD version of Flash. And I think, Pete, you said something to me last week somewhere where when I said it was too much Ezra Miller, you said, was it too much of – was both of them too much, or was it just one of them was bad and the other one was so I think what it boils down to is I think I could tolerate the younger Barry in this movie and how he was portrayed, but to have the older Barry pretty much the same way most of the time, it was just too much for me to handle, and it really put a damper on the movie for me overall.
Okay.
And I also greatly agree with Chris there. If this was the second or third movie or something like that, I think, and another actor, this might have fared a lot better, but I know they needed something to kind of reset. There's already production, so we have what we have.
Yeah. Danny, your wife is an Ezra Miller fan, right? Did you go to see this with her?
No, well, I was going to, and we just had a very busy weekend, and so I ended up just running to the theater myself last night.
Running.
We genuinely loved. That's just as good as the CG in the movie. We genuinely loved Ezra Miller's performance in Perks of Being a Wallflower. Okay. I genuinely think it was the best part of the movie, best supporting actor type stuff. And he was in where they were in. I'm pronouns. Ezra Miller was in there was something about Kevin, really dark movie, tremendous performance there. He's talented. There's talent there.
Yeah.
Where I will agree with Brian is that as somebody who didn't see the Justice League films, they didn't do enough in this movie to distinguish older Barry Allen from 18-year-old Barry Allen. And at points, it was just two of the same actor talking at each other. And and it wasn't until later in the film when the older Barry Allen really gets into the whole mom stuff and and how he's trying to do this about the mom and a lot more of the emotions are coming out.
Yeah.
But that takes 90 minutes. And so you're dealing with effectively just a mirror version of these two, you know, of this one actor playing two roles. And I think that was one of the issues that, because from the very beginning, the tone in this film jumps all over the place. Yeah. Like, you got, you know, that opening scene where it's comedic, and there's a ton of comedy in this movie. There's a ton of one-liners. And I'll fully admit, I openly chuckled a number of times sitting in the movie theater at some of the jokes in this movie. I could feel Brian's disappointment. But then there were other times where, and you know, as not to be super depressing, but as somebody who just lost a parent not a long time ago, I was a fucking mess at points in this movie. Yeah, and like, I didn't know how the movie wanted me to feel at various points. Plus, obviously, there's these huge action set pieces where they want me to go like, oh crap. For the most part, I was along for the ride, but I totally see where somebody who's more invested to the source materials of these things is going to be pissed off.
Yeah, yeah. Chris, I know, like, because you sent a picture of John Wesley Shipp with Mark Hamill before in the chat. I know, so you were aware of the 90s Flash show.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that you're a big fan of the Bruce Timm animated Justice League, Batman, Superman, right?
I was watching it last night, actually.
Perfect. And then are you also like a fan of the CW Flash show, or at least maybe?
Yes, I hung in there for that one. I think I ducked out right after Crisis because, you know, as much as I love the shows I love, sometimes with certain shows I'm like, I'm done. I'm good. This is good. I've had enough.
Yeah.
You know, and that's how I felt with a lot of the CW DC shows around that time.
Of course. Now, would you say that, like, out of that animated version and the CW version and the John Wesley Shipp version, that there's sort of like qualities that Barry Allen always has? And do you feel like Ezra Miller's Flash has those at all, or doesn't have them? How do you feel about that?
Yeah. I mean, well, let's see, the Justice League, that's Wally. That's where no. Well, I'm saying, but I you know, I was thinking about that. I'm like, is Barry ever in there? No. Is Barry, because that's Michael Rosenbaum doing Wally, but I'm not sure if Barry's ever in there.
I don't think he is. You're right.
Okay.
It is Wally.
Either way, it doesn't. I mean, let's start with John Wesley Shipp. I mean, just the time that came out right after Burton's Batman, just the intro, the opening music. Oh my God, Danny Elfman did the opening music for that show, and there were a lot of fun episodes. It wasn't on for very long, but it was a fun show. But you take guys like John Wesley Shipp and Grant Gustin. I mean, they are doing the golden age era Barry Allen, like the quintessential Barry Allen, right? And I'm not opposed to something different, but Miller just never did it for me. As a side character, sure, why not? He's tolerable. I'm just gonna, with respect, I'm just gonna try to say Miller because I'm terrible with the they. But Miller never really quite did it for me. I can respect what Ezra was trying to do, but to be in essentially a dual lead role in this, it's tough. I will say this: as the film starting off, I was like, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this for 2 hours and 20 minutes. And then I do feel though that they settled into the role. And as the goofiness, you know, went down, the emotion went up, and I was more comfortable with them and what they were doing, and it seemed to fit better. And then by the end of the film, I don't want to say loved what they were doing, but I mean, there's some moments. We're doing spoilers on here, right?
Let's just go full spoilers.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had said to Brian, because I think it's worth repeating. You could chuck, you could chuck a can of crushed tomatoes at my head, and I don't think it would hurt as much as pulling them out of that shopping cart.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I was leveled through that scene.
Yeah. I think that the flashback stuff, all the stuff with the mom, when he goes back in time and interacts with the mom, or when he's just watching himself in the past, all great stuff. And I forgot the name of the guy who plays the dad, but I know he's in a whole bunch of things.
Ron Livingston.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Because I guess Billy, I think there was a conflict, and Billy Crudup couldn't come back to play his dad.
Yeah,
which is fine. Billy Crudup is like, you can swap him out
Generic
easily with
actor.
Ron Livingston.
wow, holy shit, yeah.
It's like, Billy Crudup's not available. Get Ron Livingston.
But like, I haven't really said like how I feel about this movie in general yet, but it seems like the thing that I actually liked is the thing that all of you guys really got annoyed by and didn't like. I actually thought that the interaction between both versions of Ezra Miller was the best part of the movie. And that's weird considering that I've waited so long, guys, to see the Michael Keaton Batman get killed by the gigantic Kryptonian from Man of Steel. Like, that was on my bucket list, was to see that. But anyway, no. No, like, I actually liked their interaction.
It took me a minute as an outsider to this like DC chat. It took me a minute to realize that was sarcasm. So I was like, okay.
Yes, yeah. No, it's just so random and weird. Like, this movie, I like the idea of like this sort of older, more experienced Barry, and then this like weird, awkward, younger Barry. But I understand that they're both annoying to some extent. None of the characters feel right. Like when we watch the animated Bruce Timm Justice League, it matches up with the comics. The characters interact in a certain way. It feels just like a slight variation from the comics. Brian and I cover Young Justice, and that's different from the comics, but it's still, it captures that feeling. These DC movies that have Ezra Miller and Ben Affleck and, you know, fucking Aquaman and Wonder Woman, it just feels like slightly off. Like, you're like, oh, you guys almost got it. It looks kind of like, it's like those fucking action figures that are like rip-off action figures of like Transformers and shit, where they're called like Proto Changers, and like they look just like the fucking Transformers, but they're slightly off.
Yeah,
that's what this has always been. And I thought that, like,
to add about that, Pete, sorry to interrupt you there, is that those knockoffs, they break real easy.
Oh, look at that. Yes, take that, Zack Snyder. But anyway, I was gonna say to you guys, the movie, like Chris, you mentioned the beginning of the movie. It starts out and he's gonna go run, and the Flash title's about to start, and then these kids see him and they start freaking out. That whole sequence was a lot of fun. I have one issue with that sequence, and I want to hear what y'all's take on it is. But for me, like, he goes and he saves all these babies. He puts one baby in a microwave. And, like, I know it's like, who gives a shit? It's just the baby looks CGI. It looks like a fucking doll on a shelf. But it, like, I actually have, like, heard about a baby being put in a microwave. So that kind of fucked me up. I'm like, oh, I don't know if that's funny, you know? Sorry to go in that direction. But, like, I thought that was a real fun sequence. And I think it's, like, a good introduction to the Flash. But I wanted to hear what y'all thought about it. Like, Chris, what do you think of that beginning part of the movie?
It was fun. I could get on board with that. You know, the goofiness and the silliness of it all. But I might as well bring it up now because it's going to get brought up at some point. That, I mean, it's nice that they start you right off in the terrible CG, the terrible visual effects that are in this film. PlayStation 1, I said to Brian, I'm like, this is Matrix Reloaded. Like, this is, you know, I will give Andy Muschietti a pass on the, because he's like, oh, it's supposed to be that way. I'm like, dude, you know, I will give them a pass on how things look inside the Speed Force, inside the ball. You can get a pass on that. It's Barry's vision inside the, fine, whatever. There's no excuse for anything else, though. I don't think deep faking is more expensive than creating a face from scratch. I could be wrong, but there are plenty of moments that we'll get to where I'm like, my God, why did you not just deep fake a face? Like, bananas. So the baby's being very fake. I'm sitting there going, okay, I'm telling myself, it is what it is. Like, this is supposed to be fun. Just enjoy it. Stop fixating on this. And it took me a couple minutes of me just staring at their faces like, oh my God, this is so terrible. They look so, oh God, the dog looks bad too. Yeah. To just get over that and just try to enjoy it. And I did wind up enjoying it. There was a lot of very, you know, it's a lot of clever stuff in there. And there was a lot to enjoy. And it was fun. But man, bad visual effects just suck you right out.
Yeah. Brian, did the babies kind of remind you of like the baby from like Ally McBeal dancing around?
Oh God, yeah. That looked probably better, honestly.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, the funniest thing about this too is that I had a whole bunch of this movie spoiled before I saw it, and I saw it on Thursday night. And the first thing I saw, I saw the gif of him taking the baby out of the microwave in reverse. That was
Oh,
the single first thing that I saw.
holy shit.
Yes. So, yeah, what I appreciate about this scene is and I do think this is a very Barry Allen quality, is that he kind of takes the physics of it all into consideration more so than say they did in X-Men with Quicksilver. Although I will take those scenes any day over this. I think it was a little too goofy, and I do appreciate that he was saving people rather than just fighting the bad guys, I suppose. So that's a good thing that you don't see in these movies a lot, is you don't really see the people saving everybody else.
Really good point. Yeah. Danny, I was gonna say, like, simultaneous to Barry saving everybody, Bruce is also going after the bad guys, and there's a lot of action with Batfleck in it. You were saying before how you weren't really invested in this world, haven't really watched all these movies. Like, what do you think about Batfleck, and what do you think about Ben Affleck in this movie?
I fucking love the costume he's wearing at the beginning of this movie. Brian.
No, I hated it.
I'm sorry. I feel like I'm gonna have to write Brian a personal apology letter at the end of this.
You might.
I mean, I'm rewatching the Batmans now. Keaton for me is the best live action. Because for me, Keaton is the best at being the best Bruce Wayne and Batman at the same time. I feel like every other actor is much better at one of the two parts of that equation, whereas Keaton is great at both. And there's always something, whether it's Bale's, it's not what you do, voice, or Affleck to me is really good. And I liked him I like the alternate, the lighter blue on the costume. I don't know. Maybe it's just me as an outsider, not like the biggest DC fan. I do like Affleck. I do like that the greatest Batman did get to come and shine at the very end of this film. I mean, we're spoiling it, so but
they spoiled it. They spoiled Keaton in the trailers. I mean,
yeah.
Oh no, I meant George Clooney.
Oh, sorry.
I will die on. I will go on my deathbed and I will argue the point that possibly no actor has ever been better to be Bruce Wayne and Batman than George Clooney.
Oh.
And the movie was so fucking bad that it just killed everything. And now, we look back, George Clooney is Batman for me in the way that Eric Stoltz is Marty McFly for the characters in this film. Because there is a reality where Batman and Robin is not the worst fucking movie ever made. And we all are I'm just a George Clooney super fan, and I happen to think he looks the part of Bruce Wayne the way that we now associate Robert Downey Jr. with Tony Stark and Iron Man. And it always, I'm glad that he got to look like his older, more distinguished way at the end of this film. But yes, I did like Batfleck in this. I liked his few scenes that he has with Barry. I just wanted to ask the three of you, because like Chris mentioned earlier, Athena and I, we loved the CW shows, and we stuck with them for a long time.
Yeah.
And I didn't really have much in spoilers for me going in. So when you start to go into that final, bubble at the end, and you're seeing all these alternate universes, I'm just sitting there waiting for all the CW characters. And to me, that was a huge missed opportunity.
Yeah. Why don't you guys go ahead and take one of those? I got my thoughts on that too.
I enjoyed the Flash show, but as I kind of talked over Chris before, sorry about that. I think those seasons are just too long, and there's too many filler episodes. Shorten those down to 10 to 13, and I think you have a much more solid show overall. DC sees those shows as like a bastard stepchild. Like they're like a lower level to them, and they don't want to acknowledge them. Although Ezra Miller did actually appear in a scene in was it Infinite Crisis?
Yes.
Yeah. He appeared there, and that was really cool to see. There was I just knew they were never going to reciprocate that otherwise.
Yeah. One-way love, man. That's not cool. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I loved those shows for a long time. I mean, Brian and I watched Smallville. Like, I mean, it was like, and it's funny too because you talk about a bastard stepchild. Like that was Smallville was such a different time. They're like, we can't put them in costumes. That'd be ridiculous. It's like
Right.
we got to put them in like a friggin' trench coat.
Yeah.
But Arrow, the first few seasons of Arrow. I mean, Christ, like the third and fourth season of Arrow, just unreal. And then same, Flash had a similar trajectory, just getting better those first few seasons. Supergirl, the beginning of Supergirl, they went all out too. I mean, I think Red Tornado was in the second episode of Supergirl. Like
Right.
they really went for it also. And then they just kind of like, I don't know if there was a regime change. I know there was some problematic stuff with one of the showrunners for a while that shook things up. But to what Brian said, we're so adjusted now to the 10 episode, 12 episode season that I try to think back to Arrow and Flash, and it wasn't that long ago, and it all just kind of blurs together for me because there were so many filler episodes.
Yeah.
But they were also able to take their time and do stuff the right way. Like, anything that had to do with Reverse Flash on Flash was done very well. And, you get into a lot of deep cuts with villains because again, you're padding out the season, but that gives us more comic book villains. And Flash arguably has, just as good or almost as good a rogues gallery as Batman.
Mm-hmm.
So we get to see a lot of Flash villains, but it is a shame to see it not, like to see it, like treated like a bastard stepchild. It's a bummer because a lot of people watch the shows and there was a lot of time put into them.
Yeah,
it's weird though. Like I mentioned Infinite Crisis before on the Flash show or the Arrowverse shows. I had criticism of Smallville because I felt like they just beat around the bush so much, and I was kind of frustrated by the end of it. But, they brought back Tom Welling, and I was like, a blubbering idiot. Saying that. I don't feel like I will ever, if they ever bring Ezra Miller back in something 10 years from now, I will not have that same feeling, I don't think.
No way in hell. No. And it's so weird, right? You guys are fans of Movie Bob, or at least watch some of Movie Bob's videos sometimes, right? So I watched Movie Bob's review before I watched the movie, and he talks about how because the movie took so long to make and they went through different directors and all these different phases, right? That you can kind of see in the movie times when there was a change at Warner Brothers and they were like, oh yeah, Deadpool's really hot, so we're going to make this kind of scene. And oh yeah, we're back to dark and gritty. And you can see the changes. It's weird because I feel like with the cameos at the end, and I think the movie throughout, it's weird the choices, the things that they choose to focus on. Like when they have the cameos, for instance, so spoilers, they have Christopher Reeve and they have who plays Supergirl? What's the actress name?
Helen Slater.
Helen Slater. Thank you so much, gentlemen. And so they have them, and then they have like George Reeves, and then they have like fucking Nicolas Cage, right? And like you're not going to show the CW stuff, which was around for over 10 years and has this great stuff, but they're going to show Nicolas Cage where that isn't even a movie. It's just a documentary based on a potential movie that would have happened. And a really great Kevin Smith story. So it's weird what they choose to prioritize and focus on, right? And I think that like even the movie itself, like Michael Keaton's Batman is featured so heavily in the marketing of this movie. And I think that that's what they were hoping was going to get butts and seats for this movie. But it just, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me why he's in it. And I think we kind of transition to talking about Michael Keaton and like what came over from Flashpoint into this. Because, Chris, you said before, you used a great term. You said cherry picking. And it's like they use some stuff from Flashpoint, but like one key thing, Danny, you probably don't know this. Sorry to be like a gatekeeper to you, but for the Flashpoint comic, and there was an animated movie of it.
I've seen the animated movie.
Okay.
And that's fucking awesome. I love that story.
Right. So then from watching that movie that like it's Thomas Wayne, Bruce Wayne's dad, right? And then so a lot of people were thinking, hey.
And does the mom become Joker? Is that like the Yeah. Okay. So I've definitely seen that.
Pretty great.
Right. And so it's
I was actually going to rewatch it because I'm going down this rabbit hole, and it's like next in the queue on HBO Max in their Batman section. I was like, oh shit, I should just rewatch Flashpoint Paradox. So maybe I'll do that tonight.
Right. And so like kind of maybe you can kind of run off of what I'm giving you here, but like they could have had Jeffrey Dean Morgan as Thomas Wayne. You could have had the woman that's from The Walking Dead too be the wife, and then she could become the Joker. But it's like they chose to put Michael Keaton in there because they figured that would be the big draw. And Danny, you've seen, just like what Chris was saying before online, that like the nostalgia is not cutting it, right? Like, do you feel like Michael Keaton in that role, like, let's say, fuck the idea of like, that's Michael Keaton's Batman. What would have been more satisfying to you? Jeffrey Dean Morgan as Thomas Wayne or Michael Keaton as Batman in this?
I mean, it comes down to, you know, do you want something that's more story accurate, or do you want something that you think is going to sell more? I mean, I love Batman 89. I rewatched it the other night, and Chris brought up, like, for the Flash TV show, the Danny Elfman score. The fucking score in Batman 89, the opening credits of that movie is a time machine. I'm 7 years old. I'm in the movie theater. I'm watching fucking Batman. And so, yeah, I'm not going to lie. I got a kick out of seeing Michael Keaton play Batman. Did I need to see crazy Michael Keaton with, like, his long hair and a beard, like, come out of a closet and have, like, a ninja fight in slow motion? No, I didn't need to see that. I thought that was really weird. But, yeah, I think I would have, like, I know the Flashpoint story. So, yeah, from, like, a movie standpoint, from, like, a plot standpoint, I would have been like, oh, shit, that's where we're going with this movie. But then, you know, there's also, like, the four of us were going to go see this movie anyway. I think if you're the random person and you're somebody at Warner Brothers and you're thinking the random person who is, you know, movie tickets are expensive and they go to 1 or 2 movies a month with their families, what's going to get them to the movies? They're probably thinking Michael Keaton as Batman much more than Flashpoint Paradox, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And then, Chris, I know you must have seen Flashpoint Paradox then too. Like, how do you feel about replacing General Zod, like having him replace the idea of like Aquaman and Wonder Woman fighting each other?
Oh yeah, I mean, I will say this: I've read Flashpoint I've read Flashpoint. I read the Batman Flashpoint offshoot. I never read the Aquaman offshoot, so I really only know from that story, from what's in Flashpoint, what's in Flashpoint Paradox. I didn't. It's weird too. I'm trying to also get out of my head that I know Michael Shannon really didn't give a shit about what he did. So
Right,
I'm trying to get that out of my head as well, because he's like, yeah, I really didn't care. I'm like, well, that's a bummer.
Right.
And also, like, you know, his face, it looks like he wasn't even there.
Right.
Like, he might not have even been there. There's so much face replacement in this movie that's not great.
Yeah.
Very quickly, I also have to say, Danny brought up spaghetti. This film loves a good pasta dish, because there's a lot about crushed tomatoes, and I love the non-linear time science project that Keaton was doing as Batman.
Yeah.
I would love to see a live action Flashpoint. I mean, put it in my top 5. Like, DC, just adapt this, please. What are you doing? The late great John Schnepp, who did the Nick Cage Superman documentary, would always say on Collider years ago, the thing's there, just make the thing.
Right, yes.
Why are you like there are 85 years of great like, what are you doing? Just adapt the thing, just make it, right? So while I would have loved to have seen Jeffrey Dean Morgan as Thomas Wayne, would have been incredible. I also said the other day, like, even if you had to change the person for the timeline, Clooney would have been Clooney can do gritty. He would have been a great Thomas Wayne. I would have loved to have seen that. But then I think about summer of '89, Batman, Ghostbusters 2, Back to the Future 2, Last Crusade, Lethal Weapon 3. This is one of the best summers in my lifetime. And the summer that got me into comics. I got into comics because of Batman 89. I went to the Warner Brothers store because I wanted Batman stuff, and they had The Killing Joke, and I bought The Killing Joke, and that was the first comic I ever bought. So Batman 89 is responsible, and the impression Keaton left on me and what Nicholson left on me, that's the reason I started reading comics as a kid.
Right.
So I will say that as much as I would love to see Thomas Wayne in there as a comics fan and what could have been possible, I don't trade any of this for a second. Keaton, people at work had asked me like, I don't know anything about this. Should I, but I love Keaton. I'm like, just go. Just go, because you're not going to be disappointed. He's in a good chunk of the film, more than I was expecting, and he delivers.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. Brian, do you think that Michael Keaton is a Chicago fan? Because there's at least 2 fucking Chicago songs in this movie, including his ninja fight with the pasta and stuff too.
How did you pick up on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe, I guess so.
Or maybe just Peter Cetera's solo stuff. He may not be a Chicago, it could be,
Well, they play 25 or 624 when he's like fighting and grappling, when he's like crazy hobo in his house. Yeah. Brian too, like, okay, here's the thing, right? You and I, we love our comic book movies. We love our adaptations. Wayne Manor looks exactly like fucking Wayne Manor from 1989. Like, and they do specific
King
rooms.
of the Wicker People.
Yes,
that, right?
King of the Wicker People.
Now, reversing that though, you and I are both big fans of Feora, all right? And so, like, on one hand, Michael Keaton delivers because it's like, oh my god, Michael Keaton's in this movie, and Michael Keaton's Batman, he's back. And then Feora's in it, and she's kind of like nothing. Like, I want to know your take on both of these characters.
Well, I have to say that I think I forgot that Jeffrey Dean Morgan was Thomas Wayne in the previous movies. And I think I agree with Danny here. I would have rather seen the story served better with Thomas Wayne here. It's one of my favorite parts of Flashpoint. And just the comment about reading the Flashpoint comics, there was like 21 spinoffs. I think I read the Batman one and the main one too. Like there was no way I was keeping up with all that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, the impact of Thomas being this like bastard throughout, and then he's just like, no, I will do anything to get a world where my son is alive. Like that was such a huge part of Flashpoint to me, and I feel like that was kind of lacking. And I get why they put Keaton here, because it's recognizable. As people our age remember that from that summer, But I wouldn't even I wouldn't have minded if it was just Keaton was Thomas Wayne, honestly. And then with Shannon and Anthony True as Fiora, they were barely in it. I do like Michael Shannon a lot. I think I did like him as Zod in Man of Steel, but there wasn't much from here. So I don't feel like I want to say he was bad, but it wasn't enough to say that he made the movie or anything like that. And then Fiora was really background character material here. She didn't. I don't think she had a line.
Yeah,
she did.
Yeah.
So
didn't it feel like Zod in this movie was like Lizard or Sandman in No Way Home, where they couldn't get the actor, so they just kept like
the mask on.
They had like a character, and then they had like recycled voice footage that they used.
Yeah.
That was the total vibe I got here. It did not feel like Michael Shannon was ever interacting with these characters, and it felt like recycled Man of Steel footage with like some alterated voice stuff thrown in. And like it didn't really bother me because he wasn't really a main villain. In fact, there really wasn't a main villain almost until the very end.
Yeah. With the Dark Flash. Go ahead.
One of the things that I came out of this movie thinking was, I've heard enough of the word multiverse for the rest of my fucking life.
Yeah.
And I could really go for a calming of the multiverse, whether it's Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, Loki, this, and it's Quantum Mania, and it's really fucking annoying. If like, what I fucking loved about Guardians 3 so much was how separated it felt from everything.
Yeah. From
Phase 4, which had been really kind of on the decline.
Mm-hmm.
And now, like, I'm just nervous that now, okay, Guardians 3 is over. They're going to jump right back into multiverse storytelling. And we're just going to, and I'm just like, ugh. It's done.
Yeah. Really, really good point, man. I also feel the exact same way. I'm just like, Marvel, this next phase is called the Multiverse Saga. I'm like, oh, God.
I also forgot, fucking Best Picture winner, Everything Everywhere All at Once
Multiverse.
is still the best multiverse movie.
Right,
and then, and I also just saw Across the Spider-Verse, which was a sequel to and now there's going to be a sequel to that. So it's just, there's so many multiverse movies, and it's oversaturating the fucking multiverse market.
It's a comic staple, though. Like I haven't gotten tired of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like ever since Days of Future Past, I'm like, give me all the multiverses you can. I like that you can see things in those kind of stories where you don't see in the normal one because they can actually like kill characters off and have like these real drastic changes that you can't do in a mainline book because it's like you have to keep the status quo and you have to keep it running forever. These comics have been running for almost 100 years. Some of these guys now, so it's refreshing. But I do feel you that there's a lot of multiverses going around lately, and I could totally see getting tired of it.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the main problems, though, right? Is because there's so much going on, right? And I didn't want to bring up Guardians of the Galaxy 3 because I think we all loved it very much, and I'm worried that we would start talking about that movie more than this one. But like, one of the things that was so good about Guardians of the Galaxy 3 was that you really felt like the sets and the world around you. And actually, you were talking about Michael Rosenbaum before. I listened to this really awesome interview with him and James Gunn this week, and he was talking about how like when he meets with his team, they're part of every single process of making a movie. And he's talking about the set designers and the costume designers. So that way it's this shared vision. And I feel like WB in general does not have a shared vision. Everything's a fucking Frankenstein monster shoved together. And this movie feels like that. And like, to me, every set piece, like when you watch the Guardian set pieces, it feels like a real world. It's a tangible thing. It feels like you could walk onto it. Here, I'm not going to say it's like Attack of the Clones, kind of like CGI fest, but it doesn't feel like a real place. It just feels like here's the setting of this action sequence that's going to happen. And to me, I'm just like, I zone out when that happens, and I also kind of do hate the multiverse concept of just like, let's just get characters. Michael Shannon himself, one of his criticisms was that it's like you're just kind of playing with a toy in a toy box. That's what I feel like studios learn from multiverses. Oh, we can just take this guy here and this guy here, And it just doesn't work. Like, we haven't even talked about Supergirl yet. And like, that was one thing too. Like, you talked about that cherry picking before, Chris. Like, they essentially took the Superman story from Flashpoint and then Flashpoint Paradox, right? But they made it into Supergirl. And then they also like kind of took Superman Red Sun too, because she was like a Russian prisoner, right? And everyone's raving about Supergirl, but to me, I just felt like she was another toy that was put in there. And they were saying how her performance is really great, but I think that actress did a good job. But like Chris, what do you feel like she had to work with there?
I don't think she had a lot to work with, but I'll be honest. I mean, I may, this could change on repeat viewings. I was pretty taken with her, not romantically, but just like, I feel like she really has a, like, she's attractive, but she's strong, and she just has a presence about her. And to see someone like a different looking Supergirl, and just put on that suit, and I was like, wow, and I just kept thinking, I'm like, this is like, there's really something about her. Like, she is such a presence, and it's a shame that we're not going to be able to do much here.
Yeah.
That was the biggest shame of it all. And we may never see her again in the suit. And just the idea of what they introduced, like it was like, she had an anger in this that was like a warranted anger, whereas you get to like BVS and you're like, Jesus, he is pissed and this is dark. Like, what is this movie?
Yeah.
But like this, she had this warranted anger of her entire mission. She was a prisoner for, basically been a prisoner her whole life. And her entire mission, she finds out, was basically all for nothing. Zod killed Kal-El, and so it was a warranted anger and rage, and I was really just kind of like swept away by her. But the whole time I'm also thinking like, oh, this is sort of all for nothing.
Yeah I mean, I feel the exact same way, and it's weird because like, going with this cherry picking idea, they take stuff that's straight out of Man of Steel, they use that codex, and they're like, okay, well, the codex wasn't put on the baby, it was put on her, and that's why they're after her. Great, okay, makes sense why the bad guys are after her, right? But then Clark gets weak in Man of Steel whenever he's exposed to like Krypton or like Krypton kind of environment, like a Kryptonian environment, right? In this, she's invulnerable, and then they stab her, and it's like, how were they able to stab her? That really took me out of it. I know that's kind of stupid, but it's like they shouldn't be able to stab her with something like at least give her some of that Kryptonian atmosphere, or like use kryptonite. I didn't like that part. Brian, did you have that issue too, or am I just a weirdo?
You know what? The thing that took me out of it is that her costume was just existing already.
Oh,
it was just there. And I'm like, oh, it's just there. Okay.
But it's like, well, no, that's a valid point. Being that she was, I mean, I'm under the assumption that she came there as a child. She's been a prisoner for 20 years. Like, so to have a full grown, like it's different when Superman already had one and you have Jor-El's because it's like a ceremonial garb. But for her to have a full costume ready, that's more like we got to move this along.
Yeah, I get that, but I noticed it and it took me out of it. I did like her a lot, and I feel the same way as Chris did. Basically, it's I liked it, but we're not going to get any more of it, so there's no reason to get really excited about it, I guess.
Yeah.
I did like the little idea that her mission was to guard Clark or Kal-El, and that she it was failed because Zod killed him. And I was curious to wonder if that had happened in Man of Steel. Technically, maybe she was supposed to be there and it was killed somehow, and that got me thinking about it. But I mean, obviously, we're not going to get anything here. But while I did like it, it brought me back to how horribly they've mishandled Superman and Henry Cavill post Man of Steel.
Yeah.
All these like crappy CG cameos and bad CG with the mustache removal, and then the Shazam cameo with suit down, just literally everything. And even in this movie, beginning, they have him in a CG background on a TV screen. It's just it just highlights to me that how bad they screwed Superman up.
Yeah, dude, I completely agree. I mean, it's sad because I think Henry Cavill just wants to be Superman. Like, I think he'd literally just be in the movie and be happy. And yeah, he's the prime example of how much they fucked up this like whole franchise, this whole universe. And God, does he look fucking awful in that bubble when we see him? And it's that scene from Justice League. Danny, you said that you didn't see Justice League?
So I've seen the mustache part because obviously I have. That's a GIF of all itself. I have not seen any of the actual movie of either, like any more than like 5 minutes of either version. No.
Okay.
I did see the theatrical version of Batman vs Superman. And I think when I said it wasn't as bad as everybody thought, my only thing was I've seen worse DC movies, notably the first Suicide Squad and Wonder Woman 84, which are two of the most bafflingly bad movies I've ever seen in my life. But, just to get back to something Chris said, and I think he was quoting an interview, was like, it's right there, just do it. Like, it's really baffling how many times we see this, and it's not just in superhero movies, but in adaptation or remakes or adaptations of books we love, where it's like, it's right there. How'd you fuck up something that's right there?
Not only is right there, but to go back to what Chris said earlier, it's rushed. I mean, this Batman vs Superman, that's the death of Superman and Dark Knight Returns. How do you open that as the beginning of this Batman and the second Superman? Like,
right.
Anything that has to do with Batman is even more baffling because you have this endless cascading, just one great Batman story after another, and then phenomenal Batman and Superman stories. And you just like, what is this Frankenstein shit that you're doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Don't you guys think it has to do mostly with the success of the MCU and the fact that Warner Brothers was like, we need the Avengers Infinity War now.
Yeah.
And they were like, but
100%.
we just did a Superman. How can we have Infinity War already? And then, like you said, we get like Superman dying in this, which was a comic that like shook the world when we were all younger. That was like a generational moment for comic book fans. Even as a Marvel fan, I knew about the whole Doomsday story, and I had a version of that comic in my comic box because as a collector, you wanted a version of that comic. And
That was also an era of comics too, where they like Superman could be dead for a while, and you're like, oh, he's not coming back from it. I mean, Jesus Christ, Barry, how many years was Barry Allen dead for after Crisis?
Decades.
20 something years.
Yeah.
Barry Allen was gone for 20 something years.
Yeah.
Like they would never do that nowadays.
No. Yeah, I mean, god damn, you guys are bringing up all these points. I like it's just so frustrating because there's little bits that you can mine out of this movie that are good, that I enjoy. And I was like, oh man, if they had done something about it. Like when they show Batman and the Flash and Wonder Woman all together in the bridge in the beginning, I was like, this could have been something right here, like the Justice League interacting with each other.
Yeah.
But like, when do we get something like that? You know, like in this whole franchise that they've had so far.
Also a good example of when the humor works, because the lasso of truth jokes were killed. I mean, that's Ezra Miller being Ezra Miller and just crushing that scene. Like fantastic stuff.
Yeah. Were you guys expecting Gal Gadot to show up or no?
No, I wasn't.
What'd y'all think of the fucking Jason Momoa cameo at the end?
I could have did without it. It was a bit much. But I understand you gotta, you know.
Speaking of movies that have been in production hell forever, is Aquaman 2 coming out or did they scrap it?
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of basically apparently from what you found out like during the Johnny Depp trial that movie morphed into like a buddy cop sort of action comedy between him and I can't think of the name, Patrick Wilson's character.
Ocean Master,
thank you. It became like it's supposed to be like a buddy cop comedy, but I don't. It just kind of like fell off the face of the earth. I don't know if it's coming out.
Because the way
now.
I viewed this as an outsider, it felt like this was the reset button to like reset the entire DC universe and then just like present the key to James Gunn and be like, it's yours now. And so like that end credit scene was ultra weird for me because I was like, wait, is this like Aquaman 2 is coming out? Like, how can I possibly? The reason I didn't go see, and I liked the first Shazam, the reason I didn't go see Black Adam or Shazam was basically because I knew this was a dying universe and those movies didn't look great to begin with. And I was like, I don't care. You know,
Danny, spoiler, they're not great.
Nobody has had overly complimentary things to say about them. Most of all, the people I trust the most, you guys. So, like, that's what that end credit scene was so weird for me. Just like because my first thought was, Aquaman 2 is coming out. So
I think like the way that I took that end cameo scene, first of all, I thought it was pretty insulting, right? I thought it was insulting to the people that had made these movies before. I thought it was insulting to the character of Aquaman, that he's like this drunk that literally falls face down into a puddle at the end. I was like, come on, this is like too much. It's ridiculous. It's like in the end of Peacemaker when they make that joke about like him fucking fishes and stuff. Like it works on Peacemaker because Peacemaker's so over the top and crass and stuff. But this is just like, man, you're just making fun of yourselves, right? And it seemed like it was a stinger for like, oh, our next movie's Aquaman. You can't wait to see that. Or like, I almost expect to see Aquaman will return and Aquaman shithole of Atlantis or whatever the next one's called. But like, you guys saw the trailer for Blue Beetle before you saw this, right?
Yes, it did.
Yes.
So like, that's going to be another movie in this universe too. And that's not part of James Gunn's
He said, he said a weird thing recently. He said Blue Beetle is the first character. Yes. Yeah. And I'm like, that's cryptic. Like, like, I'm not entirely sure I understand. I mean, yeah, we're supposed to gather that the Flash is the end of the Snyderverse. And to director Andy Muschietti's credit, I mean, there are things in the Flash where, like, when you're looking at how people look inside the Speed Force, inside the ball, it looked. I didn't love it, but one thing I thought was kind of cool is that I thought it had a very Snyder vibe because the way they look is sort of, how they look in like Man of Steel when they're that gray matter, like when they're teaching, when Kal-El's learning about his past, and how there's like that gray matter that forms into that's what it looked like, just kind of like colorized versions of those people. But you know, so there's, you know, it's just still a mess. But
yeah, you know, that's such a really great point, Chris, too, because even in Wonder Woman, there's that sequence where they talk about like Zeus and stuff, and it looks like the artwork is moving too. So it's kind of reminiscent of that as well. It was kind of like they were doing Barry's version of it too, but it just looks so bad. And when they did Christopher Reeve too, man, it's just like, it's such a wasted opportunity.
All right, let's go. Let's do it. Come on. Like, it's like, like these phenomenal moments that, like I said, just, you have all this footage of Christopher Reeve as Superman. You have an entire movie of Helen Slater as Supergirl. So many films. Nicolas Cage was doing a movie every 3 months, just like he is now. You know, at that age in the late 90s, you have all this footage to pull from. Why are you not deep faking these people?
Yeah, yeah. Or
again, is it an ego thing? It can't be money. Creating a face, the amount of hours it takes. Whereas deep faking, I think you're just running like an AI program. I don't want to simplify it or give like visual effects artists any less credit than they deserve. But deep faking cannot be more complex in terms of man hours, physical man hours on the computer, than creating a face from scratch. There's no reason that you know, Grand Moff Tarkin in Rogue One should look better than all of those people in Flash by this point.
Jesus.
I said that line somewhere. I said I'll take Grand Moff Tarkin over.
Yes. Yeah, not so much Leia, but
yeah.
So
you know, it's fun. Oh, go ahead. Good.
I just, because you brought up Blue Beetle, I can't look at that trailer as it just reeks of like, I've seen this a million times. Like, is this like an important character that I have to care about? Because first of all, it's like it's an Egyptian scarab thing that turns into a suit. So it's basically like Spider-Man in Homecoming or the original Iron Man mixed into, plus it's a beetle, so that you have the whole joke about another insect superhero. I don't know what to make of it, and it just looks totally generic.
Okay, so
I was wondering what you guys thought of the trailer to that.
No, I'm really glad you brought that up. I kind of have 2 cents on that. I think probably out of all of us here, I'm the biggest Blue Beetle fan. But I don't know, Chris, if you want to prove me wrong, or Brian, but like, I think with comic book characters, what it comes down to is there's certain characters where they're very appealing to specific people, and otherwise the majority of people could give 2 shits about them. Like Moon Knight is kind of an example. Blue Beetle's an example, right? It's like, it's a deep cut, and some people love them. Like, I love Blue Beetle. But it's not for everybody, and it is kind of like a generic thing. But this version of him, where he has kind of like a suit that talks to him and stuff, this alien suit, that predates like the MCU and everything. That goes before that. So they maybe took some of that for the Spider-Man costume in the movies. Like, what do you think, Brian?
Yeah, I think that's a good point there. Although my biggest gripe with Blue Beetle, the movie coming out, is that the voice of the armor is too AI-like. I wish it sounded more like it did in Young Justice, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I actually am excited about that movie. I think it is partially about, you know, diversity and reaching audiences that are underserved. And this, you know, it's a Hispanic character. You don't see that very often, honestly. And I'm actually excited about this movie. On the flip side of that, I know there's rumors of like Sony Marvel making a El Muerto movie, which under the Spider-Man banner, which I don't even know who that is. And that says a lot to me. So on that side, like, I actually am excited to see Blue Beetle. My son's really excited about it too, so we'll be there day 1 for that.
Nice, man. Yeah, you know, I think maybe the moral from this is, like, Danny, have you seen Young Justice or no?
No.
Yeah, Young Justice is a cartoon that me and Brian have covered. Chris, have you seen it?
Oh yeah, I was the first 2 seasons before it got canceled and then brought back. I haven't seen any of it since it came back, but I watched those first couple seasons a few times.
So fucking good.
Great show.
Just to kind of bring it all back to that John Schnepp thing, like, if they just made that into a fucking movie, you know, it'd be like so much better. It would eclipse the MCU because it's like so tight, so well done. You know, like make something like that instead of this fucking Frankenstein monster.
This is why for animation knows, because they can do things like that with Young Justice. I mean, it's a lot cheaper to have a voice actor on call than it is to have, you know, a person be a live representation and keep their physique intact over a long period of time. So budgetary, every movie can't be Endgame with every single actor in it, you know?
Right.
So to that point,
that's what we're kind of asking for here with Young Justice. I mean,
so to that point, why hasn't DC, if Marvel is able and Sony is able to make hundreds of millions of dollars now with Spider-Verse, how come DC won't release a Flashpoint Paradox type animated movie into theaters? If it's got to be, agreeing with you, Brian, it's got to be so much cheaper. You know, look at Mario Brothers. Look at how much money Mario Brothers made. Like, why not do a Young Justice movie?
Well, it's got to be CG animated then, because kids don't like regular animation anymore. My son, he loves superheroes. He loves all this stuff. I show him something from the 80s that's 2D cell animation. He's like, this is fucking boring, Dad. It's not as flashy, and it won't get butts in seats.
These kids, man. Kids these days, they don't know what they're missing, man. Show him fucking Akira. Let's see if he says that's boring.
How well did was it called Crypto?
I didn't see it.
Legion
of Super Pets or something?
Super Pets. Yeah. Did that do well? I don't even know.
I think it did, didn't it? Yeah, that was.
And was it? And Keanu Reeves was Batman in that, right?
No.
Yeah.
Yes, he was. I'm sorry, you're right.
Fucking Mark Maron was Lex Luthor. Yeah, it was crazy.
Oh
man.
my god.
Yeah.
I love
it was a good time. But yeah. So, gentlemen, do you have anything else you want to add to the Flash discussion here?
Well, we haven't been talking about Flash for some time. The last thing I wanted to say generally is that with all those cameos at the end, I also felt that they were all Superman and Batman based. There was one little Jay Garrick little thing there, and like Danny said, like it would have killed them to really given us anything else that would have related to the Flash, who was supposed to be the focal point of this movie, but they had to lean on the crutch of Superman and Batman, or the corpse of Superman and Batman in this case.
That's a good point. I think that even in his own movie, Flash was made to feel tertiary, and I'm noticing that with even with the Keaton and Kilmer Batmans, where the character of Batman feels very third and fourth wheel to the villains and the love interests and the Christopher Walkens of those movies. And I feel like Flash really, once Michael Keaton shows up in this, it becomes a Batman and Supergirl movie. And oh yeah, the Flash is there too. And I agree. I will say, and I think it's very obvious, that my lack of being a DC super fan is probably what led me to enjoy this movie more than the three of you.
Yeah, I think you're on the money.
And I would totally recommend this movie to anyone who is not walking into this with a ton of preconceived notions about what they want to see in a Flash movie based on the comics.
I think he's got a good point there. Chris, what do you got to take us home, man?
Despite the messier parts of this movie, I'm very excited for Andy Muschietti to direct Brave and the Bold, if that is in fact what happens. Because, I mean, what a mammoth effort to deal with all the crap he had to deal with and pull this together and make as best a film as he could. So I'm excited to see if he continues to work with DC. I'm excited to see what comes next. But it's, for what it was, for how long this has been going on, which has got to be, just how it's changed and morphed over the last decade, and it's finally here. I think it's, honestly, with all the behind the scenes drama, it's really, the best, and, crappy visual effects aside, it's the best we could have hoped for.
Yeah. I think now that after we finish this discussion, it's time for someone to take the can of tomatoes out of the DCEU's shopping cart. It's time for it to go away. And I think you said we'll throw a party for whoever commits its murder. I think it's James Gunn. But anyway, guys, it has been such a blast talking to y'all. I'm here every week with Brian talking about comic books and their adaptations, but you can catch me and Danny over on the Lasser Cast. We're doing a Wes Craven month right now, talking about such quality movies as The People Under the Stairs and Shocker, you know, both better than The Flash. And then Chris down there, he is just as good as Danny, putting out videos constantly. Actually, he's real creative with his imagery and stuff. Future Boy Chris. You guys are both really great at putting out concise videos and concise reviews, getting to your point, unlike me. So anyway, make sure you guys like and subscribe, and we will catch you all next week for Secret Invasion.